Gaming PCs are more powerful than ever. We have an abundance of games to play with all these great technologies, yet many longtime PC enthusiasts just feel worn out. There's a palpable community fatigue, and you see it in forum discussions, YouTube comments, and even among tech reviewers themselves, a tone of exasperation with the current state of affairs. And sadly, I've been in this for a while. Even before doing this, I was watching a lot of content creators, and I've been sad to see a lot of content creators that gave me inspiration leave this space because of how toxic it's actually gotten. And, it's just really sad to see. 2025 has been quite the roller coaster for PC gaming and hardware. We've had several major launches to kick off the year, with Nvidia leading with their RTX 50 series, followed by AMD's RX 9070 series, and a few notable CPU releases sprinkled in. But let's be honest, despite all this shiny new hardware, the energy in the community feels lower than ever.
I've called for this before. I'm gonna do it again. Spin off GeForce as a separate business unit. Then you don't have to worry about the crappy P&L that's like mucking up your beautiful AI, the self-driving machine vision. You just go silo that off. You license the chip technology to them. They handle all the GeForce drivers and everything. They clearly don't have their eye on the prize. They're not on the ball when it comes to GeForce because they're demotivated. All the money isn't working on this other stuff. So you need to have a separate BU. GeForce, call it GeForce Gaming Corp or something. Who cares? You have this separate company whose entire job is to crush it in GeForce.
Very successful in the market. But if you look at feedback online from at least the enthusiast crowd, they're getting told the message, we don't want 8GB graphics cards, we don't want stagnation, we want actually usable, decent, low-end or mainstream graphics cards. I don't even think $300 is a particularly low-end card. It's still $300 US. This brilliant strategy of either the upsell, so trying to really force you into thinking, well, the 4060, 5060, they're not great products. If I want 16 gigabytes of GPU VRAM, I'm going to have to, instead of spend $300, spend a minimum of $430 US. And then, is that 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte a good GPU in other ways? Not sure. Maybe I should be buying a 5070 Ti, in which case you're suddenly looking at $750 US.
We get that Nvidia makes more money with AI than it does for gaming. And that by simply selling a gaming GPU, it's giving away money. But if it wants to abandon gaming, it should just do it. It's okay, Nvidia. It really is. If you want to just leave gaming and make all the money from data center and enterprise, you can do that. Just don't fuck it up for the rest of us on your way out the door by trying to manipulate how the coverage is handled.
And you can look at all the other stuff as well. The way that they treat their partners is very, very telling. Ex-partners, current partners, it simply doesn't matter. They dished the dirt on SGS Thomson, their ex-partner, as soon as they had outlived their usefulness. Their current partner, TSMC, takes the blame every time Nvidia releases a bad graphics card. We've seen it over and over. And then most recently, we saw the whole GPP thing, attempting to align their partners' branding with GeForce. We're talking some pretty big companies here. Asus, HP, Dell, how many more actually caved in and agreed to this idea? This anti-competitive, anti-consumer idea. Nvidia will drag everybody down with them until they are the only ones left standing at the top. And sadly, Nvidia will be the ones left standing at the top. As far as I'm concerned, they have already won the PC gaming market. But Nvidia is a company that will still try to take even more. They will never be content with what they have.
That excitement and hype that used to really define PC gaming upgrades has been replaced by frustration and a growing sense of, is any of this even worth it anymore? In today's video, we're going to be talking about why PC gaming in 2025 feels so disappointing and negative. While the market is bigger than ever, the energy just feels like it's at its absolute lowest. Let's get into it. Hey, if you enjoy content like this, drop a like, make sure to subscribe, and smash that bell so you never miss another video. Hey, what is going on, guys? Danny here. Welcome back to the channel, and I hope you've all been doing well. I think 2025 will go down as one of the best years in gaming we've had for quite a while. We're not even halfway through the year, and we've had some absolute bangers released, like Monster Hunter Wilds, Oblivion Remastered, Expedition 33, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and so many more, with plenty of more great titles to look forward to, I'm sure. And in fact, I've been having backlog anxiety, if that is even a thing, because I'm seeing all these great games come out, and I'm still here trying to get through games that were released many years ago, so I can finally play all these new games that everyone is talking about. With that said though, I wanted to point out something that I've noticed personally, and that there's a level of excitement that's been sparked up within the gaming community that I felt like was kind of missing for some time, and I for one am ecstatic that, my gaming social circles are filled with this kind of positivity rather than hearing about how this new quad A or triple A video game missed expectations by a mile. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because despite the actual gaming space becoming very exciting, I can't say the same thing about the PC gaming or PC hardware space. The two hobbies obviously go hand in hand. Many of us utilize our hardware to play these great games, and we're on the PC platform because, in my opinion, it's the best place to enjoy these games to their fullest glory. On the PC, if your rig has the horsepower, you can leverage higher graphics for better visuals and or performance beyond 60 FPS, beyond 120 FPS. And, you can play on ultra wide resolutions, you can mod your games, which is a totally different ballgame on its own, and that can completely breathe new life into an already great game. You can use whatever type of peripheral you're comfortable with. If you like the precise aim of a keyboard and mouse, you can roll with that. If you want to kick it back on your couch and play with a controller, you can totally do that as well. Or do you want to take your games with you on the go? That's where you can leverage handheld consoles like a Steam Deck. I love just how unrestricted the platform is because, you have so much freedom to customize your experience to your liking, and it's why I personally can't really see myself going back to a console. According to a research report shared by Global Newswire, the gaming PC market is expected to reach over $180 billion by 2032, growing at a compound annual rate of nearly 14%. That is absolutely massive. Over these past few years since the start of this decade, PC gaming has exploded, and it really puts things into perspective because while the business side of PC gaming is clearly booming, it doesn't actually quite line up with how many of us feel as consumers. It's almost like the market is growing on paper, but the actual experience of being a PC gamer, that feels more fragmented, more expensive, and just less fun than it used to be. The disconnect between what the charts say and what the average gamer is going through right now is honestly one of the biggest issues that's plaguing this market. I look back at a year like 2016, and I think that was an incredible year. I think it was the golden era for PC gaming. During that year, we had incredible titles come out like what we're seeing today. We had stuff like the Hitman reboot, Doom 2016, Dark Souls 3, Overwatch, Battlefield 1, Titanfall 2, and so many more. And it was just an incredible year, and we also had a lot of incredible hardware come out as well that us PC gamers could leverage to play those games. But, even though that hardware was incredible, it wasn't coming out at price points that was going to leave a large gaping hole in your wallet. Since most PC gamers at that time were residing in the segment where they'd pay about $200 to $300 for a graphics card, we got awesome GPUs like the RX 480 and the GTX 1060, which delivered excellent bang for the buck. And I remember watching both AMD and Nvidia's live streams at the time, and I was absolutely blown away by seeing how they were releasing GPUs that targeted the masses and delivered GTX 980 and R9 390X performance, and they were selling them for around $200 to $250. Keep in mind that those cards, they were going for around $400 to $500, which at that time was considered the high-end and enthusiast segment. That to me is what a new GPU generation is all about. Getting high-end performance accessible for the masses. Then in 2017, we got our world absolutely rocked, where AMD released the first generation of Ryzen CPUs, delivering more than 4 cores to the masses, up to 8 cores on a mainstream socket, whereas Intel at the time had, the masses and general consumer convinced that 4 cores was all that you needed, and if you wanted more than that, then you had to jump up to the HEDT platform, which was a lot more expensive. Following that, we got the legendary Nvidia GTX 1080 Ti, which set a new bar of high-end performance, but again, at a price point that was not ludicrous for its segment. Whether you had a budget of $400 for your gaming PC or $2,000, it seemed like every segment of consumer was happy and content. Now fast forward today, and the environment feels completely different. When it comes to the CPU market, I don't really have too many complaints there. I feel like we have, plenty of great options available at various segments, whether you want a good fast gaming CPU, or you want a good editing CPU, or you just want a good all-rounder CPU. There is something for everyone. And when you take a look at other components like, motherboards, RAM, SSDs, power supply cases, all of that, you can find some great options that offer really, really good value. You hardly ever hear people complaining about those components because, prices are not really an issue. But man, oh man, when we turn our attention to the GPU market, that's where things get really spicy. And I don't mean that in a good way. It feels like the graphics card market has become the poster child for everything that's frustrating about becoming a PC gamer in 2025. We've seen prices skyrocket over the last few years, and while the performance gains, it seems like they are there on paper, the actual value proposition for the average gamer has become increasingly questionable. And here's the intriguing part about all of this. When Nvidia first unveiled pricing on the 50 series during CES earlier this year, the reactions or resentment compared to what we see today were actually kind of mild, because on paper, some SKUs were cheaper than the outgoing 40 series, and the only GPU that seemed like it had a large notable price hike was the RTX 5090. But keep in mind, with that graphics card, you got a 33% bump in shaders, you got 32 gigabytes of the fastest G7 memory built on a 512-bit bus. You're getting a hefty piece of hardware there, and you can talk to machine learning bros or the editing bros, but they're delighted that this kind of hardware is available at these price points, which, that is something we're going to get more into later on. But when you look deeper into it, you start to see just how much Nvidia has stagnated the market, if not even regressed their offerings over these past few generations. Gamers Nexus posted a video last month on their channel, which highlights this problem. This chart in particular shows the pricing of various Nvidia GPU segments adjusted for inflation. And at a first glance, when you look at this, it doesn't really seem like the pricing has gotten out of control. In some instances, we're looking at cheaper pricing compared to the previous generations, apart from the flagship. But the flagship, well, it's the best of the best, and they can charge whatever they want because, if you want the best of the best, you have to pay up. There's two glaring issues here, though. First is that MSRP for the 50 series has been basically non-existent. Let me know if you can actually find an RTX 5070 Ti for $750 or an RTX 5080 for $1,000. Some models have Founders Editions, but they're extremely limited and can only be found at places like Best Buy in the US and Canada. You can go to your local retailer and take a look. You'll find hefty markups. The cheapest 5070 on Newegg.com is around $600 US. Cheapest RTX 5080 at a place like Micro Center, which is often praised for some cheaper pricing compared to the other retail competitors, we're looking at 5080 selling for around $1,400, if not even more than that. And that's just the US. In Canada, we're looking at 5080 selling for $1,700, which, funnily enough, makes them cheaper than the US market after conversion, but still, that's a pretty large markup nonetheless over MSRP. The flagship of this generation, the 5090, while now more in stock and is readily available, it's crazy expensive, usually around $3,000 plus, if not even more. I think one of the reasons why prices for this GPU in particular have gone up so much is because apparently due to the trade wars going on right now, the 5090D in China is no longer going to be a thing anymore, so you can imagine buyers from there are trying to creatively get their hands on a 5090, thus increasing demand. And for those who saw my previous video where I talked about PC parts in Japan and their market, all I can say is that if I was living there, I would probably give up on building or playing on a desktop and probably go back to playing on a console or get something like a Steam Deck. The second problem arises when you actually take a look at this chart from that same GN video, which highlights the CUDA core count percentage relative to the largest die of that generation. And you can see over these past few generations, up until the 50 series, the amount of GPU you're getting for your money is less and less. For example, the RTX 2070, that gave you 53% of the flagship die. The 2070 before it gave you 54%, the 3070 gave you 56%. But with the 40 series, we see a pretty steep decline, and now we're at this point where the 5070 only gives you 28% of cores relative to the largest die from this generation. That's atrocious. That's equivalent to the same amount of cores a GTX 950 offered you from 2015, and that card sold for $160 US, equivalent to about $216 in 2025 when adjusted for inflation. A 5080, a GPU that should be selling for $1,000 but actually sells for $1,400 plus, is giving you less shaders than a 3070 Ti did. Why wouldn't people be upset at Nvidia for this? Prices are going up, but you're getting less and less hardware for your money. How does this translate to real-world performance? Well, with each of these GPUs that launched, I have gone over in detail analyzing various benchmarks from online reviewers and highlighting the insignificant improvements. So you can check those videos out. Not going to go through all of that again here, but in a nutshell, the performance improvements have become some of the lowest we've ever seen, and in some instances, we've seen regression. A recent example that you can take a look at is Doom: The Dark Ages, and perhaps Nvidia needs to release an updated driver or they have to work with the id Software team, but you can see this benchmark from Computerbase comparing the 50 series against the 40 series in this game, and we're looking at single-digit gains, if not performance regression. It's embarrassing because this is an Nvidia sponsored title as well. Nvidia has, of course, been well aware of this, but how they're actually getting around these insignificant performance improvements is by hiding it behind AI features and making it seem like you're actually getting a large performance boost or a large generational uplift in performance. It's why Jensen went on stage and said that the RTX 5070 is equivalent to an RTX 4090.
With the Blackwell family, RTX 5070, 4090 performance at 549. Impossible without artificial intelligence. Impossible without the 4 teraops of AI tensor cores. Impossible without the G7 memories.
Nvidia has recently indulged in strong-arm and fearful tactics with independent reviewers to try and circumvent the bad press. Gamers Next has recently made a video covering this where Nvidia told them they needed to include more and positive coverage of technologies like DLSS and multi-frame generation, but not only that, they said they would also revoke their ability to create partnered content with Nvidia employees like Malcolm Gutenberg, a thermal engineer who worked on the Founders Edition coolers, who GN have collaborated with multiple times, and people really like content on that kind of stuff. It's kind of wild to see how Nvidia is saying that unless you cover MFG and our other AI features in a more positive light, we're basically going to cut your access to the educational content surrounding the thermal engineering aspect of it. I'll have a link to that video below, so I highly recommend checking out. It's definitely quite an eye-opening video. Reviewers also haven't been particularly happy with Nvidia lately because of the way they have been handling review embargoes. It's just been a pretty scummy tactic on their end. I'm sure most of you have already heard about this, but Nvidia recently released the RTX 5060, an entry-level 8GB graphics card for $300, and considering its specs, you know that reviewers were probably going to review it negatively because 8GB of VRAM is just very limiting in modern games, and selling a $300 GPU in 2025 with 8GB of VRAM is just laughable. So what Nvidia did this time was that they didn't sample or just didn't really have any sort of official sample program for the 5060, but they said that you can source the card yourself from partners, but even if they did do it beforehand, it didn't matter since there aren't any press drivers, so they'd have to wait until May 19th to get the drivers like everyone else. The problem arises that Computex is happening at the same time, and most of these reviewers will be away and can't review it, can't test, and therefore you aren't going to be seeing any reviews published. Now, there were some media outlets who did post their preview pieces, but honestly, they're just paid advertisements by Nvidia since they're following strict guidelines for some early access. So in my opinion, if you see those review pieces that were posted on the official review date or when the card had hit store shelves, I would honestly just ignore those because those were partners or content or commercial content creators that worked with Nvidia directly and got paid for their content. So paid content, bad, just ignore it. And that is the direction that Nvidia wants to go. They want to avoid as much negative press. I mean, it will still happen, reviewers will still publish their data, but it just won't happen on release day, or didn't happen on release date. It's baffling that Nvidia would indulge in this kind of nonsense to begin with, because you're holding like 90% of the market anyways, right? We've learned from the past it didn't matter how much press the product got, because it's still going to be selling in volumes. I mean, you can just go back and take a look at the 4060 Ti reviews. They were atrocious, but you can see how the card is now sitting comfortably at the top of the Steam hardware surveys. I think going forward, what Nvidia might just do is they're going to cut out independent reviewers altogether, and they're just going to be partnering up with, those commercial content creators who are happily going to take their money and just regurgitate their advertisements, or they're going to be working with Twitch streamers, because, those content creators, they're not going to be objectively reviewing their products. They're just going to regurgitate what Nvidia has in their press slides or whatever. I've seen them on places like Twitch, where they put their Nvidia samples into their gaming PC, and then they turn on all the bells and whistles, they turn on multi-frame generation, they turn on all the AI features, and they say, oh my god, guys, look, it's so smooth, I'm getting like 300 FPS, and I have like path tracing turned on, look at it, it's so amazing. And then, their chat audience, they're like, oh my god, that's remarkable, and they're probably not very tech savvy, so they want to obviously get a piece of that pie and want to get on board with the hardware. And I mean, since most of them can't afford something like a 5090, well, Nvidia has them covered with a $500 or $550 5070, which still supports that same technology. So that is essentially how that psychology or that trickle-down mentality works with Nvidia. Now, you might be wondering, well, forget about Nvidia. It's time PC gamers finally gave the alternative a chance. And you know what? Initially, it seemed like things were pretty promising. AMD made a splash with the RX 9070 and 9070 XT announcement. They promised strong performance at competitive prices, $549 and $599 respectively. I tested both the RX 9070 XT and RTX 5070 Ti in various head-to-head comparisons, and I found that both of those cards traded blows with each other, albeit the 9070 XT was much worse in performance per watt. But hey, the 9070 XT looked like a great proposition. While the 5070 Ti sits heavily marked up on shelves, you can get yourself a 9070 XT for $600 with similar performance, and their software features have also come a great way. FSR4 is a nice upscaler, they have frame generation, and it's on par with Nvidia's old CNN model. We have a solution, right? Well, not exactly. When launch day hit, those prices were impossible to find. Unless you lived in the US and you lived close by to a micro center, retailers had limited stock at MSRP, and most listings were around $100, if not even more than that, above MSRP. In Europe, stores even said that the advertised MSRP was only to be applied on the first wave of cards, and then prices would rise. But don't worry guys, Mr. Frank $10 Azor said that they're going to be working with their retail partners to encourage MSRP pricing. So what ended up happening was that many of the initial reviews, they looked quite positive. Initial sales numbers looked pretty good as well, with some retail data pointing towards the 9070 series outselling all of the RTX 50 series. But soon days after, people in the market realized that this was all a sham, and MSRP pricing is not going to be coming back. In other words, AMD's launch pricing was a bit of a bait and switch. They got positive headlines and their reviews based on the $549 to $599 MSRP, but the majority of consumers cannot even buy it at those prices. And I don't think those initial positive reviews or the limited MSRP models did them any favors, because the RTX 5070, which came out at around the same time, is actually showing up on the Steam hardware surveys, while neither the 9070 XT and 9070 are anywhere in sight, suggesting that they didn't really outsell Nvidia as many people think they did. What's crucial to understand here is that AMD doesn't hold nearly as much of the market as Nvidia does, and in order for them to claw that back, they need to be delivering on a product with impeccable price to performance. These past few generations, all they have done is release a competing product that's a minus $50 discount from the Nvidia card, and that doesn't do anything for them. This time, while it initially seemed like they weren't doing that, we're still back to square one here, because if you go on Newegg.com, most 9070 XTs are starting at around $850, and you can find 5070 Ti's in stock for around $900. And my recommendation is that if it's just a $50 difference between the two, go with Nvidia for the better efficiency, better ray tracing, upscaling, and frame generation technologies. Now, since we brought up those AI features a couple of times already, I wanted to sort of pivot towards the software side of things and also talk about that. And also, this really highlights why these hardware increases have been so lackluster, because in the manufacturer's eyes, part of that deal is that you're enabling upscaling with frame generation, and that gives you your total performance improvement. It's why Nvidia shows marketing slides and comparisons that can do, 4x frame generation against graphics cards that can't do it, because, they want to highlight the large performance improvements or make it seem like you're getting a large performance improvement. But those technologies, they're not perfect. They can come with drawbacks such as, weird artifacting, shimmering, and, input latency, which is one of the biggest turnoffs. I'm not, a perfectionist when it comes to graphics. I'll ignore visual issues here and there as long as the game is fun and it can get me invested in it. Honestly, I put that stuff on the back burner. But if input latency is noticeable, that can totally ruin the experience for me. I've made a couple of videos already talking about upscaling and frame generation, and I showed how these technologies are great for people on older hardware. I showed how a 7-year-old RTX 2080 can comfortably play demanding modern games with ray tracing with the help of upscaling, and the experience is pretty good for the most part. The issue stems from when you have, new games like, Monster Hunter Wilds, Oblivion Remastered, Doom: The Dark Ages, all great games. They were praised for a lot of great things, but they're bringing even the most high-end GPUs to their knees, and it doesn't really make much sense. So the solution, we're told, is, just turn on upscaling, just turn on frame generation, alleviate that low performance. But like I said, those technologies don't come without their own drawbacks. A game which was released last year that had loads of issues upon launch and still has issues to this day was Stalker 2. I've been using this game in my benchmark suite, and even with higher quality settings, I'm finding myself questioning how this game performs the way it does, because I've played several other open world games which look just as good, if not better, released many years ago, almost 10 years ago, and perform much better than this. Another example that we have is Monster Hunter Wilds. Graphically, it's not horrible, but it has sort of like a cartoonish aesthetic to it, which again, I'm not saying looks bad, but when you take a look at the performance, you immediately notice that something is wrong with the way this game is optimized. And I'll be making a separate video about this, talking about it in more detail, but this game and, many others of it are guilty of turning on upscaling or frame generation, or they have it baked into the quality presets that you select at the top. So if you're someone who's like, I don't want to go through all these settings, I'm just going to select overall quality preset and set it to high or ultra, well, you might not even know that you're actually using frame generation, or you might be using some sort of an upscaler, and there are many games that are doing this now. So then you get people making these memes or complaining about how in 2025, when games should be looking much better and more realistic, you get games that feel or appear blurry, and it feels like you're playing with a coat of Vaseline on your monitor. And it's pretty polarizing to see, because Nvidia and even to an extent AMD are still pushing 8GB graphics cards onto consumers, which already come with a boatload of VRAM issues. But then when you combine that with technologies like DLSS and FSR upscaling along with frame generation, the problem actually becomes worse because they utilize VRAM as well.
And what about frame generation? Because 60, in my opinion, is the minimum before I turn on frame generation. So let's go ahead and check it out. We'll just throw regular frame generation on and see what happens. And what happens is that we run out of VRAM, guys, because obviously running the game at native resolution with DLAA is a bit more costly when it comes to VRAM. And as you can see here, enabling frame generation is enough to fill up that 8GB VRAM buffer and spill over to system memory.
But those were just a few examples, and we've seen multiple AAA or Quad A games this year or last year released, and they were just in a absolute poor condition on PC. Shader compilation stutters, asset streaming issues, memory leaks, stuff that, used to be rare is all too common now. Even with high-end hardware, games just don't feel like they're running great. It's hard to feel good about your expensive PC or, your new shiny GPU purchase when it's not running good, or even the console version may in some instances play better. Not to mention, but the prices they're charging for these games is getting higher and higher, but you're getting a less polished product for your money. It's similar to what's happening with Nvidia right now. They're charging you more money for less hardware, as we've covered, but they've also been plagued with numerous driver issues and QC issues, burning connectors, cards that are missing ROPs, people experiencing black screen issues, driver timeouts, and their drivers lately have been an absolute mess. So it really begs the question, a company like this that's, valued for $1 trillion is having so many issues and giving you such shady or shoddy hardware. It just doesn't really make sense. At the end of the day, companies like Nvidia and AMD have made it pretty clear where their priorities lie. Gamers, they aren't the main focus anymore. We're just a side hustle. The big money is in AI, data centers, and the commercial clients. That's where the best engineering, the best silicon, and most of the attention is going to. Meanwhile, on the gaming side, we're being slowly fed recycled dies, artificial product segmentation, and launch day scarcity to trigger FOMO and impulse buys. It's like they're drip feeding the gaming community just to keep things afloat, but without really delivering any sort of kind of great value or innovation that built this market in the first place. And people are starting to notice. I'm seeing a lot of these comments on my videos. I'm seeing more PC gamers just say, screw it, I'm moving to consoles, or I'm picking up a Steam Deck, or I'm gonna go explore cloud gaming. Not because they want to leave as a PC builder or PC gamer, but because the platform they love doesn't love them back the way it used to. I still clearly remember those live chat reactions as AMD unveiled the RX 480, or when Nvidia unveiled the Nvidia GTX 1080 Ti. There was so much energy and so much excitement in those crowds, and you could totally feel that. But now it's the total opposite. It feels depressing. It's certainly a weird time because by the numbers, PC gaming should be on top of the world. The market's worth is sky-reaching. Gaming PCs are more powerful than ever. We have an abundance of games to play with all these great technologies, yet many longtime PC enthusiasts just feel worn out. There's a palpable community fatigue, and you see it in forum discussions, YouTube comments, and even among tech reviewers themselves, a tone of exasperation with the current state of affairs. And sadly, I've been in this for a while. Even before doing this, I was watching a lot of content creators, and I've been sad to see a lot of content creators that gave me inspiration leave this space because of how toxic it's actually gotten. And, it's just really sad to see. And it's certainly ironic because the hardware, it's never been more powerful. The games are better than ever, but somehow everything in between, pricing, the product strategy, the optimization, feels completely out of sync. But here's the good news. We're not powerless as consumers. It's time, you gotta just start voting with your wallets. If a product doesn't offer good value, just don't buy it. Look for an alternative. If the launch feels like a bait and switch, call it out. If enough people actually hold off on their upgrades for last-gen deals instead of, chasing hype, companies will actually be forced to rethink how they approach this market. We've seen it before. Bad launches flop, overpriced products sit on the shelves, and eventually something gives. So be patient, stay informed, and don't let manufactured hype rush you into a bad deal. PC gaming is still the best platform out there, don't get me wrong on that, but only if we keep holding these companies accountable and demand better. So for now, that's going to be doing it for this one, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. If you guys found this video to be informative and entertaining, then leave a like. Let me know your thoughts and comments down below. Be sure to check out the video description for cool links and ways to support the channel, such as using my Amazon affiliate link. And if you're interested in seeing more content like this, then consider subscribing. I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.